Hi, this is Ken Gidge, and this is Gidge World, and welcome to it. And we're very lucky this evening because we have Cindy Rosenwald here. She's a four-time state representative. I believe, Cindy, you were finance. You're in finance right now, correct?
It's true.
And you were for 3 terms in Human Affairs?
Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs.
And the last term you were the chair of it.
The last 2 terms, actually.
The last 2
So
terms.
for the last 4 years, I had the honor of chairing the committee.
And let me tell you, folks, if there is anyone out here who is more qualified, I don't know who it is to do these things. And Cindy, I'm very, very happy she's here, and she probably doesn't know why she's here, but I corralled her into it. And one of the reasons was this week, her name came up in the newspaper regarding redistricting, such as she is in Ward 3, and they wanted to take Ward 3 and put it into Hudson. So why don't you move over here? How did you feel when you heard that?
Here's the thing about that. Ward 3 has about 9,000 people living in it. Hudson has just under 25,000 people in it. So the original plan that I heard about Monday night after the secret plan was leaked by the press was that Ward 3 would be combined into a 10-member super district with Hudson. Now, if you think about Hudson being 2.5 times as big as Ward 3, that would clearly mean that all of the elected reps from those 10 seats would come from Hudson. And that would leave Ward 3 with absolutely no representation that lives in Ward 3.
Whose idea was that?
I think it was the House leadership's idea, because this is the plan that was developed by the House leadership. I don't know who it was. It was just made public yesterday, about 24 hours before the public hearing.
Okay, let's make this clear for some people. State Representative, I'm in Ward 6, and there's 3 of us in Ward 6. Cindy is in Ward 3, and she is the representative. Now, you are up next to Burley Park area?
Yes, Ward 3 starts about at Monument Hill, so the monument.
Okay, right.
And it goes up to the Merrimack line.
Oh, okay, so it's all of...
It's all the way up to the north end of Nashua.
And they were going to put this in with Hudson.
Mm-hmm. And then it goes east to French Hill, and it goes west to a little bit of Amherst Street, a little bit of Manchester Street, and a little bit beyond the Henry Burke Highway. But it's essentially between Manchester Street and Concord Street, and then east over through French Hill, up to the Merrimack line.
And what they wanted to do is put you
it
in
into Hudson, which of course is on the other side of a river.
Now, this is because the Republicans are doing the redistricting this 10 years, so they can do that if they wanted to.
Well, they'd have to get the votes to pass it.
And
I don't think they were going to get...
And today, the final...
Well, the plan, when it was released yesterday, in fact, did not do that to Ward 3. And it gave Ward 3 in Nashua the same 3 state reps that the other 8 wards would have. So the original plan was to arbitrarily take Ward 3, give it no representation, but be represented by Hudson, a town with whom not only do we really not share any community of interest, but we've actually had a significant difference of opinion over a bridge project that would have destroyed a neighborhood in Ward 3, but is very much desired by Hudson.
By Hudson. So
it was a bad idea.
It was a bad idea, and I saw that. I think it came out probably about 1:30 yesterday.
The plan was released to the public about 1:30 yesterday. It was released to the Republican House Caucus last Friday and this Monday.
Oh.
But they weren't allowed to talk about it, and it was
So,
not
so
released.
what they want to do to you is to upset you for about 3 or 4 days, thinking that you're going to Hudson. I like Hudson. I think Hudson's a great place.
But it's not Ward 3.
But it's no, you don't belong in Hudson. I mean, do they? They give us 50 cents a mile. Would they give you 50 cents a stroke to get across the river? I mean,
I don't know what to
well,
say.
that's
And
pretty
the
ridiculous.
interests of Hudson are very, very different from the interests of a city, and very different from the interests of Ward 3.
I would think so, but so that was sort of, call it, floated. And I want to talk about that for a moment because I saw one of the plans, and 5 out of 9 wards in Nashua, there would be just 2 state reps and 1 floater. And I have no idea what a floater is, how you become a floater.
Well, it would be a district, so you would, for instance, right now there are 8 districts, I guess, in Nashua. There's Wards 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 4, 6, and 7, and then there's a district right now that is Wards 5, 8, and 9.
Yes.
Which has 10 reps. Well, we know we're going to lose a rep.
Yes.
Or at least one. So we're either going to have 27 reps or 26. Depends. There are plans that have both being floated. But let's say that we were to have 26 reps.
Okay, I'm in Ward 6. Now, there is David Kendall, myself, and Representative Buxton. Now, we would only have 2 state reps
And then
and
there
a
would
floater.
be a big district that somebody would file to run in. And Ward 3, I think all the wards in Nashua under that plan would have these floating districts. So if I wanted to run for state rep from Ward 3, I could either file in the district that is just Ward 3, and there would be 2 seats for that, or I could decide, gee, I really want to represent half the city of Nashua. I think I'll run it in that big district, which is essentially about the size of the Senate district. And you know how expensive those races are.
Yeah.
So smaller districts are much easier and less expensive to run in.
And I'm sure that the Republicans, the way they were set up, because let's face it, there's a lot of conflict up there against us.
And among themselves.
And among themselves, which we'll get into. But to do something like that to us here in Nashua would be awful. I couldn't run if I was decided to become a floater. I couldn't do that. That's too expensive.
Well, and it's very difficult. I mean, I think people who run for the Senate raise a minimum of $50,000. I don't know what you spent on your campaign last year, but I'm sure it wasn't anywhere near that.
No.
Because that's a lot of fundraising.
Yes,
Right.
yes. And by the way, I'm doing fundraising right now. I will give you a telephone number, and you can send your. No, we better not do that.
It's a little early.
But literally,
Unless you're running for the
we should
Senate.
start right now, in a sense, to start raising money if we decide to run again. It's bizarre, but they came to their senses. And I got a call from a Democrat that said, make sure you thank Cindy Rosenwald, excuse me, that's your husband, does I know. Also, Peter Silver, I understand, he did do some work to help this along the way it is, from what I understand, and also the mayor.
The mayor and the Board of Aldermen, you know, the other night unanimously adopted a resolution to oppose carving Ward 3 or any ward out of Nashua and putting it into a district with Hudson.
Well, so everyone did a lot. And so we ended up pretty good here in Nashua. And those people that I mentioned, thank you. And thank you out there.
The public also really let their voices be heard. And social media can really
Isn't that
help with
nice?
that.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah. Because probably like you do, I walk my district when I'm campaigning. I know many of my constituents. I've rung
Yes.
their doorbells. I've seen them at the supermarket. I've talked to them on the phone. I've emailed with them.
Yeah.
And they like the idea that their state reps live in their neighborhood. That's our advantage in New Hampshire with this giant house, is
Yes.
that people tend to know their state reps, and they like that. So the public, I would have to say, got a little freaked by this
I can
plan.
imagine talking. You just mentioned the house, which is 400. Gingrich, Mr. Gingrich, came up there about 2 months ago when he was sitting up in the
Yes.
above, and I went up the back stairs and I whispered. I said, "Mr. Gingrich, I see 400 people down there. We only get paid $100 a year. So next time you hear people talking about doing service for the community, tell them about New Hampshire." So I upset. I think I scared him a little. But
He wouldn't be able to pay his $500,000 revolving loan at Tiffany's
oh, that's
with
right.
his $100 a year salary.
What goes on sometimes in these people's minds? And then he signed an oath that he would not cheat on his wife, or this is his third wife, and he wanted others to sign the same. And I'm going to myself, what's going on with these people?
I missed that. I didn't see that.
Oh,
It's a little late, though, I think.
yes. But he is, let's face it, he can debate. What he did to Romney regarding, about you would have been a full-time politician if you would have, not lost to Ted Kennedy, which is probably true. So it's very interesting. Now, I know we're going to go all over the mat on this, but what do you think about the people coming up here to New Hampshire? Have you met any of them?
I have not met any of the Republican candidates this time, but I have in the past when neighbors or friends have hosted house parties for
Yeah.
candidates. I've met many Democratic candidates,
Yeah.
but in the past, I've been invited to meet Republican candidates as well, and I think it's great. I really do. I mean, I think to be able to test out your chops in New Hampshire with not a lot of TV cameras, a little room to maybe
In house parties mean house
buff
parties.
up your act
Right.
before you
And
take
it's
it
not
national.
necessarily mansions that you're going
No,
into.
it's not necessarily mansions, but you can really get to meet the candidates. So I'm a little sad that I haven't had the opportunity to meet the Republican candidates, but like you, I've heard them all when they've come to speak to us on the House floor.
I was
and I
at
think that's
the,
very interesting.
I was at the Secretary of State's office, and in comes the Vice President. It was nice meeting him. I've never met him before.
I've met him.
I met a few of the Republican people. They all seem really nice.
I'm
They're
sure
really
they are.
good people. But none of them have that glow, that presidential, whatever it is, that energy. And you know it when you see it. And I think our president at this particular time has it and has had it. And by the way, we must be happy a war stopped today.
Yes, a long war.
9 years, 9+ years. $800 billion. Sadly, 4,500 soldiers killed. And 32,000 wounded and some awfully. What a waste.
And thank God they're coming home.
That's right. And one thing that I heard, this is really sad, there is a ceremony to sort of take the flags down and wrap them up. And there's a group of soldiers that are going to be sort of like the security for this ceremony. So they're going down the highway and they're supposed to meet the Iraqi army, of which then they would go and they would sort of surround this area. The Iraqi army didn't show up, and by the law of Iraq, the soldiers cannot drive without Iraqi soldiers. So they didn't go to the ceremony for the security. I mean, nothing happened, thank God. But when I heard that, I said, 4,500 people of our youngsters, $800 billion. Will you show up at least to let us leave? I found that very sad. But I think we're all happy that everyone will be home for Christmas.
Yeah.
So back to this part of the world, the redistricting is, I take it it's done.
Well, there was a public hearing this afternoon. I went to part of it because Nashua had been so
Yes.
involved in it. I went to about the first 2 hours of it, and there were a number of people from the public who had come to testify, but at that point, it was all still state reps who were testifying. And as far as I could tell, at least while I was still there, they were testifying in opposition to the plan that was presented.
Opposition?
Mm-hmm.
You mean there still could potentially be a change for us?
Well, I think nothing is over until it's over. I think there's still potential for changes.
Well, we're not letting you go to
assume-
Hudson. You do know that.
No. I mean, there was not any discussion about Nashua. And in fact, there are a number of plans that give Nashua 27 reps. So it's not just this plan.
And
that
enough with the
does that.
floaters. I don't understand. I still don't. You explained it. I still don't understand it.
Well,
Why floaters?
because the population doesn't neatly divide itself into towns and city wards. And so within a political boundary like a town, the ideal state rep seat is to represent 3,291
Correct.
people. But the cities and towns don't divide themselves up quite that neatly. And so that's why. But the courts have, as I understand it, said you have to maintain a relatively very limited deviation from that ideal number of 3,291.
Yes,
And
I think you can go 4,000 or
maybe
something. Yeah, a little.
5% in either
Correct,
direction. But
correct.
it's not clear whether that's for everything or district by district. So there are a lot of unknowns.
The Secretary of State was sitting where you are, Bill Gardner, and we were talking about the first in the nation primary. And off the air, I said, if they really want it, somebody really wants it, why don't they just have as much representation as New Hampshire has? And he said it would take 11,500 reps to take care of California. So obviously, he's using that also to say, okay, you may do that. So here in New Hampshire, we do complain, but we're lucky.
Oh, yeah. We're lucky to live here.
That's right. And we're lucky to live here, but when we sort of need money and they take 10 cents a pack tax off, what is your feeling about that?
Well, let's keep in mind that my background is health policy.
Yes.
So there's much evidence that the more expensive cigarettes become, more new smokers will not start smoking. So the more expensive you make cigarettes, you will prevent people from becoming smokers.
Correct. Okay.
So the idea of lowering the cost of cigarettes is just a public health disaster. We spend at least $600 million a year in New Hampshire on tobacco-related illness. It's very expensive.
Excuse me?
At
No,
least
wait,
$600 million a year. And that includes not just lung cancer and emphysema, but asthma. And not just the smoker, but everyone who is affected by that tobacco. It's very, very expensive. So that's one perspective on it. The other perspective is that it's giving up revenue. That
11.5 million up to this point, I believe.
I think the projections that we had made were that we could be losing up to $45 million a year.
Over a period of, okay.
Over a period of a year. I think that we calculated we would need to sell another 20 million packs of cigarettes to make up for that 10% decrease. And of course, it didn't lead to lower cigarette prices.
Oh,
it led to
yes.
greater tobacco company
Isn't that
profits.
interesting? We took,
And yet we're still losing revenue.
yeah, we took 10 cents off per pack, and they just happened to raise it 10 cents. I believe it was sort of even, and they said that the Speaker of the House had gone to this particular meeting someplace
That's
with
what
the
I
tobacco company people, and they come back and well, here we go. We have Republicans who are turning and saying they're going to save us a lot of money and they're going to do us good. So, and I have a complaint about them getting rid of the 5.5 social workers here in the Hillsborough County, which is $441,000.
The drug and alcohol program.
That's another one also. That's $270,000. So all told, those two programs save approximately $2 million for the state, and that's less than $900,000, keeping people out of jail, etc. But you get rid of that, and then you take 10 cents a pack off per pack, 10 cents. We lose the money.
And we lose the services. And college tuition goes up 10%.
That's not smart. And have you heard, is the speaker thinking of making a U-turn on this? And I
doubt it, although there is a trigger mechanism that was written into House Bill 2, that at the end of the biennium, so at the end of June of 2013, if revenues are down, that cigarette tax can come back up. I think it's probably too late. I think there's going to, I'm sure, be discussion about intervening now and bringing the cigarette tax back up.
And you haven't heard anything. And is it, Representative Benecourt came out probably 6 weeks ago and said revenues were up and cigarette sales, and I'm going, excuse me, what state is he from?
Well, revenues are down, and part of it is the cigarette tax, and part of it is the hospital tax. And as you know, we cut about $250 million out of the hospital funding this year. $115 million of it was higher taxes. And the immediate result was that hospitals across the state started laying off staff, which they had to make cuts to their operating budgets. But those are very good jobs that have been lost. And Nashua, with its 2 hospitals, has lost hundreds of jobs.
That's awful.
It's difficult. We've seen unemployment go back up since the summer. Unemployment was down. It was
yes,
like under 5%, I think, in New Hampshire.
Yes, a 4.9 or 8, I think, close to 4.8, and the Republicans come in, and the first thing, I think, was 1,300 jobs.
I think it was more than that in the hospital sector. I think it was close to 2,000 jobs lost.
What is the sense of that? Look, I mean, I understand we have to cut, but when you cut and you take people out of the workforce, which people do go out and buy, they do send their children to schools, they buy clothes, cars, pay for mortgages, all sorts of things. That's just wrong. You know, Cindy, I've always said that you can't spend money that you don't have, and you can't take food away if people are hungry. So you got to make a choice. So I don't think people should try to push a balanced budget, because if they do make it law, then it's going to be a lot worse than it is now.
Well, we always balance the budget in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
At biennium by biennium. We always do.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that to lower your revenues just means you have to cut more. And we walked away from revenue.
Exactly.
And I
so
think
how,
that
if
was
you
a
can't balance
wrong
it, what do you
decision.
do?
Well, we do budget it. We balance it, but that, you know, if you're giving up revenue, if you're leaving revenue on the table, you're going to have to make deeper cuts, and those cuts put people out of work.
That's what I mean.
Right.
So all of a sudden there comes a point where balancing the budget makes no sense because you have to cut so much. And if revenues, as you said, are not coming in.
Well, yes, especially if you've lowered the cigarette tax.
That,
You've assured that revenues will be lower. We laid off state auditors in the Department of Revenue Administration. So that means there will be fewer people to bring in the tax revenue to make sure that it comes in.
whose idea was that?
And that was part of the Republican budget. We laid off, I think, 9 auditors.
I know. And my thing was always those social workers. I thought that was awful. That was just awful that they
Well,
did that.
I know you're on the county executive
Yeah.
committee, and I was
Yes.
myself last term.
Yes.
And those social workers do a lot of good, and the drug and alcohol
Yes.
programs, that saves a lot of money elsewhere in the system.
I was surprised to see Representative from Hudson fight the drug and alcohol program. I was,
Which representative?
well, I don't want to mention his
Oh,
name,
okay.
or because I could get in trouble.
Oh, okay,
They might throw me off a committee or something,
okay.
which is another story, which is interesting. Well, I was surprised that they fought that because it really helps people. In fact, we had a judge come in, police come in, and tell us that this is the case. It helps, it works, keeps people out of jail, saves money. And what do?
Right.
Gone.
There's a lot of alcohol abuse in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire has a very high rate of high school students using drugs or alcohol. So if we can intervene before someone is really a terrible addict, I think we
Correct.
save not only money but the social costs.
Correct.
We
And
save
also,
them as well.
the worst of the worst is suicides. Suicides are up in New Hampshire.
Yes, I think that they are.
Yes. And so it's
Yeah,
not fun times.
it's very hard.
Yeah, it is. It is very hard. And it's also very hard for us as representatives. There are 103, I believe, to 297, or do we gain 1 or 2?
I think it's 103 right now.
103 to 297, and so they have a supermajority. And it makes it very hard. I have found some of these people not to be ladies and gentlemen. And as you know, we have, in one of our LSRs, we have a bullying bill.
I'm a co-sponsor.
I knew that. So explain that to. I've tried to mention a number of times.
That was the first bill filed
That's right.
this year, and it was filed by a state rep from Cheshire County who felt that she had been bullied and intimidated by the House leadership. And she thought it was inappropriate. So she filed a bill to say that there shall not be bullying on the State House grounds.
Imagine that.
And she asked me to co-sponsor it, so I agreed to. Because I think we should treat each other with civility as well. There are many, many people that I know on my committee now and from before. I don't agree with them on policy, but we get along well, we're friendly. When we disagree, we're not disagreeable. And I think that's right. And, there are plenty of times when we agree. So we try not to let it get personal.
There is the Quant, father and son. I mean, they took a beating because they were against the right to work bill.
Yes, Lee Quant was removed from the Finance Committee because of that.
That's, well, if that's not pressure. I mean, does he have a committee now?
I don't think so. I don't think he's actually
So
on a
representative
committee.
without a committee.
I don't believe he's on a committee, but that may have changed in the last few months.
That's just,
I'm not sure.
well, I have seen it. In fact, in the executive committee meeting as for Hillsborough, I saw that right up front. It was, I'm not going to mention who was there, obviously. I don't want to do that because you start mentioning names and all of a sudden it's just going to come back to these people. And here I am. Why should I worry about that? It's too awkward. Why should we have to worry about that? But this lady was sitting, and I was 3 chairs down from her, and there was a vote taken, and she voted more toward what she believed, which happened to be Democrat. Somebody came up, stood over her, and banged the table. I mean, right over her, and banged the table, and then went down on her face, and I went, hey, back off. Wow. And he bangs the table again and says to her, what are you going to say to him? And she turns around and said, mind your own business. So,
she said that to
yes,
you?
Yes, but she was intimidated, and then what did she have to do? She had to turn around, and it wasn't an insult to me. I saw that. So that's ultra bullying. That's wrong.
I don't disagree.
No, and as far as I know, this has never happened.
Well, now that you bring that up, I'm sure you remember the incident last month where the birther lady came from California, Orly Tates, to a hearing at the New Hampshire Ballot Law Commission, which is by statute a bipartisan commission. And she and some state reps, a couple of state reps, were requesting that President Obama be removed from the presidential primary ballot because they did not believe that he is a citizen of the United States. And the Ballot Law Commission unanimously rejected that request. And these state reps started screaming, traitors, this is treason, and they intimidated an assistant attorney general and an assistant secretary of state so much that those individuals kind of locked themselves in another room and had to call the security force. And the attorney general has now asked the state police to investigate this incident because he has said it's not appropriate for members of my staff to fear for their personal safety.
And yes, in fact, it's on YouTube.
I've seen it.
People can
Right.
get it yelling and screaming, and there's a
Saying
couple.
if you come to Laconia, you better be wearing a mask.
Gee.
We just can't treat each other this way.
Well, I think a bunch of Democrats ought to get together and go roast a few of the Republicans and see how they like it. No, we shouldn't do that. But that's very serious, because this is bipartisan.
It's bipartisan, and you know, I think most people just think that was way out of line.
Yelling and screaming, and in fact, that representative sits right behind me.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and she usually doesn't yell and scream like that, but it was truly awful. So people out there, if you don't know who your representative is, quite simply go to the New Hampshire website, government website, and you will find out who is your representative. You're in Hillsborough, you're in Nashua. It's really easy to find out who they are. This is a Democrat. I am a Democrat. We're talking about Republicans, and if we're wrong, you have the right to come in. I will give you 5 minutes to come in and sit down and talk to me. Tell me how wrong I am. If so be it, I don't care. I feel that if you are upset at something that I say, I think you should have a right to, talk it right back to me. But I also, Cindy, I would like the right to do the same to them, because there are people who do talk shows on this station who I've asked to come on my show, and they haven't. And of course, we would be talking about the same things we're talking right now. So I think they're chicken. So,
Maybe they don't want the competition.
Yeah, well, it's kind of odd, isn't it, that we're feeling this way, isn't it? You have some bills here. This is really fun. Explain what you have in front of you.
Yes. Well, as you know, we're going back into session January 4th and 5th. And the first things we're going to be dealing with are the bills from last year that were held on to over the summer and the fall for further work. There are about 150 of them this year, which is an extraordinarily high number, and some of them are extremely controversial. I looked through the list, and I thought I would just mention 4 or 5 bills that we're going to be voting on that I think are really controversial. The first one is House Bill 334, and it says that there can't be a prohibition on bringing guns onto state, city, or county property. And so that would, for example, include our state colleges and universities. It would include the New Hampshire Veterans Home. It might include, for all I know, the state psychiatric hospital. No one has been able to say yes or no on that one. The way I read that bill, it maybe would even include City Hall here in Nashua. I think that's pretty controversial. There's another gun bill. That's House Bill 536. Right now, if you want to have a gun in New Hampshire and you're going to carry it open, so you know it's showing, you don't need a license. If you want to conceal the weapon,
Put it under your jacket or, sure.
you need to get a license for that. This bill, House Bill 536, would make that license optional. So you could decide you
Get
want
it if you want to, and if you're half nuts and decide you don't want to spend the money and the time.
Right, and also I think it could have an effect on revenue for the cities and
Yeah,
towns too. Because
and I think we ought to make it clear, we're not against guns.
I'm not against
No,
guns.
we're not
but
against
I
guns.
think New Hampshire has the right gun laws,
Yes.
basically, right now. So personally, I don't really vote to make them more restrictive or less restrictive.
I am for people owning guns. I am for instance, as you know, they can come into the State House supposedly with guns.
And they do.
And they do. Oh, yes. There is a few people who sit in front of me right in the House who are having guns.
And now they're allowed to have them on the House floor.
That's where they sit,
Yes.
right in front of me. And I thought, well, you know, if you really want to bring a gun into the State House, I think you ought to just check in. You know, just check in and give you a name and let them say Representative A has a gun. Because if something takes place and someone takes a gun out and uses the gun to help somebody, and God forbid it ever happens, and the police come upon this, the person carrying the gun is probably, a lot of people are going to get hurt. So there's no way of
Especially at the age of the House members. But there are often children up in the gallery,
Oh,
too,
yes.
because, you know, the fourth
Yes.
graders visit every week. And the visitors are allowed to have guns up in the House gallery now as well, although they're not allowed to carry it concealed. We are.
We
We
can.
can carry concealed, but if you're up in the visitors gallery, it's got to be an open
Yeah,
carry.
you have to have it open. That would really make the state police happy, especially when we're sitting right down below them. I mean, we don't want to give anyone any ideas. Okay.
That's true. Well, let me just talk about another couple of bills. The House Bill 446, I find incredible. It would de-license 6 professions, and it affects about 29,000 people across the state would not have to be licensed any longer to practice their professions. So this would include the hairdressers and cosmetologists, people who do manicures. And so let's just think about this. If you're going to have your hair dyed, that involves the use of what could be pretty strong chemicals.
Yes.
And you want to make sure that you don't get your scalp burned.
You would want somebody licensed, obviously.
I would. If you're going to have a pedicure or a manicure, you want to make sure you're not getting a fungal infection from instruments that haven't been cleaned. You don't want to get lice at the hairdressers because the combs that they're using haven't been cleaned. So in addition to those more aesthetics, also includes the athletic trainers. Now, many children, school children, play sports, and athletic trainers are licensed. So if a football player gets knocked on the head, I'm happy to know that a licensed athletic trainer can maybe make that quick
Decision.
on-the-field
Yeah.
assessment and say, either you need to go be seen in the ER.
Or just
I think
stop
you're
playing.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Sit on you're right.
But I think that parents feel more comfortable knowing that there's a qualified and licensed professional who can maybe keep their children from really having a serious athletic injury and not having it be assessed. Also includes massage therapists. So, for example, if you're a massage therapist and you lose your license in a neighboring state because maybe you have molested a client, you could come to New Hampshire and you wouldn't need to be licensed. We wouldn't even know that you had lost your license.
Whose idea is this? Who's coming up with? I mean, these are people who should have a license. They come really close contact, obviously.
Physical contact.
Right, exactly.
Well, also the court reporters would be delicensed in it. And if you think about it, the court reporters, they're responsible for the official transcript of a trial. And that can have such a huge impact on people's lives and livelihoods.
Yes, and money. Let's not forget the money part of it.
That's right. So this affects about 29,000 people in New Hampshire who have worked hard, maybe gone to school, passed the qualifications.
Have a job.
And they are subject to discipline by their professional board if they don't keep up with their profession, if they don't practice it within professional standards.
And would they like people running over from Massachusetts who doesn't have a license and taking your job away?
Right. So, yeah, that's an amazing bill to me. It passed out of committee on a very close vote, but it did pass. So that's coming to the floor January 4th or 5th. Then there's a constitutional amendment. It's CACR 8 that would allow taxpayer funding of religious education, which certainly would be a very significant change in public policy in New Hampshire. And
what happened to the separation?
Right.
You know, that, believe it or not, it really works. And if you take a look around the world, it may not be Christians, but it may be in other religions like Muslims. And when their clergy runs, you know, the country,
we don't like it.
You know, you're right. And
right.
The people who live under that don't like it. So keeping, you know, church and state separated. I
think it's pretty basic. You know, it's one of the first things we all learn about our government is that
that amendment would be challenged, for God's sakes. Well, we would. You and I would. Yeah. Okay, all right.
I don't expect to vote for it.
No, of course not.
Finally, the last bill, I know you're interested in this, House Bill 309, and I am as well. It would either repeal or put certain service limits onto some health insurance treatments or coverages, and specifically it would repeal or make optional coverage for hearing aids for adults. It would...
which means insurance companies don't have to.
They would not have to pay for that.
It's up to them. And of course, I'm in commerce, insurance, and banking, and I know the insurance companies would just love to take the option, pick up the option, and, you know, help people with hearing aids.
It would repeal the requirement that insurance companies cover a birth through a midwife. And for many women, for non-high-risk pregnancies, it's a less expensive and really a welcome option. It would also put service limits on coverage for children with autism, which has been demonstrated to save so much money in the school system. So it saves property tax dollars.
Saves a lot.
If you can intervene with a very young child with intensive therapy services, you can save hundreds of thousands of dollars throughout the child's public schooling. And early intervention, the same thing. children
Yes,
under
that was that
3.
came into our committee, and
That's
early
right.
intervention. I'm thinking to myself,
These programs
this is the time
work.
where you can save money if a child has something that can be corrected immediately.
Right. But it would put service limits onto early intervention programs.
Well, Cindy, I'll tell you, we have gone a little over an hour, and I think you and I can and will do this again. In fact, you ought to take off your little thing there. We ought to sit down and do another hour, so
Which
you look
little
like you're a
thing?
different person. You're a
This
little,
one?
yeah,
Oh,
like it's after the holidays.
So you won't know it's Christmas.
Yeah, it's correct. It's interesting, obviously. As I told the people, you are an interesting person. You've worked very hard. You are open to absolutely everyone, including those pesky Republicans, for help. And also, I think you'd probably agree, we're coming around the holidays, and there are a lot of people who need some help. And the Salvation Army is a good organization if they wish to give to the Salvation Army. Also, Marguerite's Place is also a good organization, and also the Santa Fund for the Telegraph, which for 50 years that's been going on. So if there are some people out there who would like to contribute to these organizations, when doing radio, I worked with all of them, and they were all very good and very trustworthy. And I know this time of year, everyone sort of says, oh, we've got to help somebody, but it really is year-round. So if you can't do it this holiday season, wait a month, and I'm sure these organizations can help you. And
the need is great.
Absolutely. So happy holidays to you.
Thank you. You
All
too.
right.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, you will be back.
Okay, I'll be back.
Okay, this is Ken Gidge, and this has been Gidge World. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next time.